All right, everybody, we're still kind of doing some behind the scenes stuff here. Give me 1 second. There we go. Let's see. Let's move this guy right here. We also need to go get another. Not what I want. Okay, let's see here. Let's take you down. So I want to welcome everybody to the Rest Aaron Forge giveaway on Patreon. Takes slow. Takes a while. Build up a following. That's fine. Appreciate these two. One of them is going to be getting a pretty cool kit, I think. So let me just make sure we bring up the chat window here. Because why not? Oh, it's unlisted. Okay. Paste this to our box over there so people can watch if they like. We're going to get the chat window. If there is any chat going on. All right. So I want everybody to know that I appreciate all the views, appreciate all the help and input. And these two gentlemen, Daniel Blackburn and Billy Earls, have been absolutely great with bouncing ideas off of and, just, yeah, that looks good, man. That looks good. You know, doing the normal things that fans do, but also doing the things that friends do. So if it doesn't quite look good, doesn't quite look right, then they absolutely will tell me. Good morning, Daniel. Jello, as you said. So the kit went really good. There wasn't really any hiccups in it. A lot of times when you're making something like this, you'll have an issue with something and you'll end up having to remake it, a couple times. And there really wasn't. I initially went out and started with the saw, and I wanted to forge the saw out, but it wasn't working. It wasn't to my liking. It was very frustrating, and I really didn't think I needed to forge it out. It would have been nice to forge it out. It would have been a whole lot more grindy because unlike the the hip axe or the hand axe and the ads, the saw has to be relatively smooth and slick sides. Period. Or none. It has to be that way. So yeah, it was one of the pieces that didn't get forged, right? And so it was cut out and then basically made the same way you make anything else, but it had its challenges. So the hardest thing about the saw was making sure the teeth were right, you know. And they're not like your normal teeth. So you guys saw in the video where I'm not precisely keeping an angle. It's just it's eyeball, hand feel, and they're close, it's really close. But what I will say is that those teeth cut very well. Once I had a couple test runs where it was a little harder to cut through like super dry wood, hard wood. But the other like store bought saw that this is kind of based off of was the same thing. It was really hard to cut through. And this was prior to actually doing a file pass after quench and temper, and it was doing pretty good, doing really well. And what I really enjoyed about this, and what I kind of knew about this tooth pattern, because I've made them in the past, kind of a diamond pattern, offset diamond pattern, and it's almost like a grinder, like teeth, like actual teeth. That's kind of how they look and work. It's not like a saw blade where you actually have tiny blades. They are there, and it works that way. But they look like the crowns of molars, um, and which is rather um, apropos to beings that the molars are meant for grinding, and you know grinding on plant tissue, and the the meat eating teeth on humans and animals are sharp and pointed, and you have that's what our canines for tearing and ripping. And then they still have that kind of diamond pattern to them as well. But when you look flat down on the piece, you get it's not as wide, so they have these facets in them where the teeth meet here, just like a molar does, but the molars are like really flat, and they're still faceted on the top, right? And they intertwine. Well, the same thing with the saw teeth. They cross, right? And there is a channel in there that you could take out, right? If you really got in there with super fine files. But what I'm seeing it allows it to do, it almost works as a rake. And so it keeps those teeth clean and cutting the entire time. And I was cutting uh we fell those limbs out there you guys saw in the video, in the test video, you know, late fall, and they were still green. And so that was a green wood there, and the problems that you can see in the test video with the saw was purely mine. It was not the tool at all. It was purely me just not having used a saw like this very often. And the some of the issues that I did run into with the design is not going to inhibit its operation. It's just, maybe this could have been a little longer. The handle, like so the handle on the saw itself could have been a little longer, right? A little longer, maybe a little fatter on the pommel side, but for the most part, that's basically just cosmetic, and it might work for somebody else. But I have relatively large hands, and relative, but the so for me, and I wasn't making this for me, so it doesn't really matter. My hands were going on it. They feel comfortable. All handles feel comfortable, but for the use of the saw, I could have used myself a much longer handle. but it still got the job done. I was still able to figure out the correct way to hold it throughout that test and make it work. So, it worked out. It was good. The saw was going to be the worst piece. If anything was going to happen, go wrong, not work, it was going to be the saw. Don't make a lot of saws. This is the second one that I've made. The first one was on the back of a gigantic buoy. Freaking like a 18-inch buoy, and there was like 14 inches of saw on the back of it, and it was a straight diamond pattern that I just cut X's in and then sawed them off. This was a V pattern that I relieved material, large amounts of material, and then went in and filed those mountains down, right? So that was probably going to be the biggest fail point, and especially going through the quench too. I mean, you have all those little sharp, hard edged pieces there, and that could be a cracking point at any point in the quench. It was something that I was worried about, and I wasn't all that keen about quenching this at a super high temperature. We did end up quenching it at a relatively good temperature that was going to allow for a good hardness, and then that's the main reason. One of the main reasons why I didn't do such a hard temper on it when after the quench was that we had quenched it at a slightly lower temperature than what is called for, and then we torch tempered, which is a light temper and a very controllable temper. We torch tempered that blade, and we ended up doing it to actually all the pieces. We for the main point is that my tempering oven isn't big enough to hold these pieces, and if I wanted to do a hard torch temper, which I don't have available right now, I would take my oxyacetylene rosebud. I don't have any gas, so I need to get some gas. But we did end up, getting a pretty good temper on by the tangs and everything on everything else by sticking them in the forge, because the hardened cutting edges of like the axe and the adze were going to be well away from the fire, and we could really see and control that. So they got a really good temper on them so that there wouldn't be any breaking or snapping or anything like that. If anything should happen, they should bend before they break, and that it should take a lot to do that anyways. But the saw was definitely going to be the absolute worst case scenario, and I wasn't sure how I was going to do it if the current way I was doing it didn't turn out. It was nerve-wracking, to say the least. The next one that was probably going to be the most nerve-wracking was the adze, and that's because it's such a weird tool, and you're off angle all the time. So, and I want to say off angle, you're off plane. You have the shaft of the adze here and the handle, they're all in plane with each other, but the head is out of plane with the shaft and the handle, and getting that to line up and forge correctly and not create cold shots and everything in the piece was hard, to say the least. It didn't look hard. I mean, when you watch the video of me doing it, it doesn't look like it's hard, but it was difficult. I was very, very cognizant of oversmithing and certain points during that smithing process, because it could easily fold over and create a weak spot at any moment in time. And fortunately, it didn't do that. And then we left it thick enough to where we could put a slight grind on it, clean it up a little bit, and have a really nice tool. It turned out very good as a digging tool, a root cutter. Of course, you have the axe, so you always have the axe. But this is a tandem thing. You could with this set. The only thing missing from this set, really, to make it a full woodsman set, would be like a mallet and an auger bit and an auger. If we had a mallet and an auger to go with this set, you could build an entire house with this, with just these tools. So that's all it's missing, is an auger and a mallet. You could build a mortise and tenon house, cabin, with these tools. All of it. This is the only tools that you would need. It would take a while, but you could do it. And that in itself, knowing that what each of these tools can do, and I've never made an auger before. Maybe that's coming down the line here, and that would be a really cool thing to do. But that's it. You're just missing an auger, so you could drill holes for your tenons. You can make mortises for your tenons. So that's it. The axe was the axe. It had the. I've made a lot of these. I've forged a lot of these like this. You could tell in the video that the ads video, there wasn't as precise a forge work. Mainly, a lot of it that was due to I was running up against a time hack, my own time hack, and in my head saying, we got to get this done. We can clean this up on the grinder. And we did. But you can tell in the video that the axe was a lot more finished with a hammer, especially in the stop motion video of the forging steps in between heats. Excuse me. You could really tell the cleanliness of the profile from those pictures. That was before it even hit a grinder, and it just was more comfortable. It was a lot less forging. It was easier to hold on to. You got to remember the saw and the adze are roughly the same size lengthwise, but the adze is a much harder forge because you have an off-plane angle, right? So if this is your shaft and that is your bit, and then you have to have something coming back at you while you're forging it, it's difficult. A lot of things can go wrong, and it can get off center real easily, and it's so long that it can start snaking on you, and then you're chasing, and you have a shaft with a very large bit on the end of it that's waiting. When it's hot, it gets heavy, and if you're not careful, you're just going to be chasing bend after bend after bend, and you're never going to catch up. And so how we countered this is we did basic planishing blows, so very light blows. Those that are in the car body industry know what planishing is, and anybody's ever taken a dent out and then had the big wide thin hammer head and the anvil on the back, and you're taking that hammer, you're planishing. And so we were taking planishing blows at lower temperatures because we couldn't support the head anyway of the adze, and very light blows to take these kinks out, and it turned out good. It worked out, luckily, and we had to put it in the vise to once right after quenched them just to make sure, and we did that with all of them because they all kind of had a slight warp to them. But once they came out of the vise, and we didn't have to make a 3 point vise setup to do that in there. And we just put it in the vise where the major bend was, and then kind of tapped it while it was still hot. I'm talking 1,000 degrees. You don't want to hit it too hard because you end up breaking it because it's prior to temper, right? So it's just a little bit of pressure and a tap. And if you have a hard, speaking of that, if you have a really hard warp like that in places, what you do is you put it in the vise and you take a stick and you push against the warp, and then get a spray bottle of water, and you use salt water, you can use regular water, distilled water, whatever you want to use, and you spray. So if the warp is going this way, you then spray on this side of the warp, so that, and you slightly push on it, you spray on that, on the hillside of the warp right at the apex, and that water cools that portion and pulls that warp out. I didn't have to do that because it wasn't that bad of a warp. And a lot of times I'll look at a piece and I'm like, I'll see it. But 9 times out of 10, nobody else is going to see it unless they're looking for it. Right? So these little warps were basically just me aligning everything, making sure that my center lines were relatively in place. And it's not as important to me on something like this because to have it completely center line. The important part is, can you index it while using it? And yes, you can. There is slight undulations in the surface of each one of these, the axe, not necessarily the saw, but the axe and the adze, that makes it so it gives the illusion that there's a warp, but it's really just a low point where a hammer blow or something like that hit, or the press that got pressed a little bit, but it's not actually, the center line is still there. So if you look straight down, yeah, you'll get a good picture on the center line. But like, again, everybody's eye is different, and so it looks good to me. I used it. I was able to index it really good, and you didn't see it in the video. I used my dominant hand for the adze and for the axe and everything, but I did use these in my non-dominant hand, which is my right, and I'm still very good at, I'm very ambidextrous, but you can still index just as well. So there is an issue at times when I'm making things to where I'll test them to my left hand and for some reason forget to test them in my right. But that doesn't happen very often, because I'm holding everything in my right hand, with the tongs, and so when I'm holding it up, I'm actually indexing it from the right hand, even in a pair of tongs. So, but yeah, I mean, it was a really great project, and we had a lot of fun using it, or doing it and using it. The leather work has always been for me kind of I do enjoy the leather work, but it's that culmination, the end. It's time I feel the need to get done, to be done with everything, so I can move on to the next project. And so the leather work is always this kind of, let's hurry up, and with the way my elbows and my hands are these days, and it's just basically due to me not paying attention to what I'm eating, and or life gets in the way, and it's 9 o'clock at night, and by the time we get something defrosted or something like that, it's not going to work. So we go get a pizza for everybody to eat, and that's just not good for me at all. And that's just me. But and I'm not willing to take time off either. I'm not willing to take an extended leave and just do nothing while the tendonitis heals, and in my wrists and my fingers, and and everything and heals. I'm just not willing to do it. So, I just need to pay attention to what I'm eating and do the work. But we have laser CNC for cutting now that we're going to be, setting up. We're still setting up the giant puzzle that is the leather sewing machine. We're going to finish that today and get it into its place within the equipment line. And we got a few things to build for the laser CNC before we can actually use it. So, but yeah, it's this whole project was great, and I'm really glad and proud to be giving it away to these two men. I know it'll be appreciated and loved. So without further ado, we're going to spin the Bushmaster kit giveaway wheel here, and I will be contacting you as soon as we find out who the winner is. And congratulations beforehand. Hey, look at that. Congratulations, Daniel Blackburn. Nice job. That's outstanding. Little backstory on this. He was talked to his wife about getting on Patreon again, and showed her the early stuff on this kit, to where he could get this and potentially get it. And it's what really was allowed him to get on here and do some things. So, Mrs. Blackburn, I truly appreciate it. This is as much yours as it is Daniel's. So, thank you. Thank you to everybody who watched the videos and who will continue to watch the videos. And thank you to my patrons, Billy and Daniel. What you do helps out. It does more than what you pay. It's the advice and just the extra brains and eyes and everything on the projects that I put forth. You put forth really good advice and everything when it comes to, and just encouragement too. That's awesome. Just to, if there's nothing you can say that you want to change it, that right there in itself is great, because it lets me know that I'm on the right path, because I'm making something that you would actually enjoy watching, and that means a lot. So thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. Daniel just said, don't tell her that it's hers as much as mine. I'll never get to use it. That's probably true. That's probably true, Daniel. So I'll be in touch with Daniel here shortly. We'll get the shipping and everything information, and we'll get this sent out to him. Yeah, big congratulations to Daniel Blackburn. It's outstanding. So I want everybody to know that I appreciate him, and we're gonna get back to work here this next week. I got a lot starting this next week though, and we'll cover that in the podcast on Monday, on kind of what's going to go. It's the only time I'm planning a podcast on Monday. Is we're gonna basically talk about everything that's coming down right now, and how the podcast is going to run from this point on. Is that we're going to, a little heads up, our podcast is going to be related to what we're working on, and whether we're working on the house, the chicken coop, the projects coming out, the fillet knife project that we're making, and other things, so that it ties in well with like the videos coming out and everything. And then we'll just switch gears, because I'm not necessarily running out of things to talk about. I could talk forever, but normally what happens when I do the podcast is, if I know that I'm going to need to be out and about early morning the next morning, I'll record my podcast the night before and schedule it to come out. And right before I hit record is when I decide in my head what I'm going to talk about, and then I just talk for 45 minutes to a half hour to 45 minutes on that specific, you know, title. And the same thing goes for when I do it when I wake up in the morning and I get out of bed and I either get some ice water or some coffee, and I don't know what I'm talking about until right before I hit record. And then we talk about it. So this is the only planned one that I know what I'm going to talk about on Monday, which is, you know, everything that's coming down once again, to kind of line it out for myself and to talk it through, but to make sure that I have the time to do all this stuff, because like last year we shut down during track season. I'm not going to do that this year. We're going to see how it works with coaching track and going to all the meets and having all the dinners and the video reviews for my throwers. You know, we'll see how it works. You know, it shouldn't be that difficult. You know, especially, you know, since I treat this like a job anyways. You know, I just need to set an off time. You know, from 3 o'clock on, I'm no longer, you know, Nathan the blacksmith. I'm Nathan the coach from 3 to 5 o'clock, 5:30, and then from that point on, I'm Nathan the husband and dad. So, but yeah, we'll talk more about that tomorrow, and we'll get on at we'll probably have that come out about 7 a.m., maybe a little after, depending. So, but yeah, thanks everybody once again. Appreciate it. Continue to share, continue to push, continue to do everything that you guys all do, and we will continue doing what we do. So stay safe out there, be well, and as always, for John.